All right. So we wanted to first dive in to let you know what you've gotten yourself into this morning. So we are going to, as Angie said, we'll talk a little bit about burnout, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma. But the majority of our time is going to be spent with you all in breakout rooms, talking with each other, particularly about building compassion resilience. And so that's where, we really want to focus our time today, letting you interact, share what's working, what's not working, so that you can build your practice based on all of the experts that are in the Zoom room right now. So some group norms or group agreements that we have to be able to build safety and to be able to have interactions is we invite you to participate at your level of safety, of felt and psychological, physiological safety. Um, or a little bit outside. If you got a really good night's sleep, if you had a really good cup of coffee this morning or tea or whatever your morning pleasure is, you might be able to step a little bit outside that comfort zone. The reality is that just outside our comfort zone is where magic happens. So we invite you to try things on, see if it works for you, be open, practicing non-judgment, taking space and making space, which is one of my favorites. And what that means is because we are going to spend so much time in breakout rooms, making sure that you are conscious and present and taking the space you need to share and interact and be together in community, but also making sure you take responsibility for making space for others to do the same. Um, Making sure that we are patient with ourselves, with each other, with technology that doesn't always work the way we think it should work or want it to work, especially after a full moon or a full moon's coming. And, it seems like the whole world goes out of whack when we have a full moon. So, but most of all, we want you to have fun and enjoy being in community with other folks, and opening up this conversation about building compassion resilience. Um, we invite you to be, particularly in the breakout rooms, if it's possible, to be on camera. Again, we want you to feel safe. We want you to feel like you can interact. Um, and that's fine to be off camera if you need to be, but just inviting you to be on camera when you're in your breakout room with other folks. Angie, anything I forgot? I think that's it.
Are there any other group agreements that anyone
Yeah.
wants to add? I always like the Vegas rule. What happens here stays here. Okay.
Right. If you're typing, keep on typing, and we'll circle back and read that in the chat if there's another agreement or something that again helps you feel comfortable in this space to be able to talk about things that could be activating, that could make you think and explore and dive into some things that might activate your systems that you weren't expecting to be activated. So again, reminder to take care of yourself, whatever that is. Get up, stretch, walk around, drink some water, on or off camera, all those things. So launching into talking a bit about an overview of compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma, burnout, remembering, and we saw through the poll, the breakout of folks that are here. I always say, we get into careers that serve other human beings for that really big paycheck we all get, right? That's the reason that we're here. That's my little tongue-in-cheek joke when I talk about this slide in particular, because recognizing and honoring that it's the commitment of the work that you do that also makes it so challenging and makes us all so susceptible to things like compassion fatigue and burnout and vicarious trauma. So this slide, anybody have any reflections, please feel free to come off mute, or if you want to share in the chat. Is this hitting you a certain kind of way, or is it just, yep, this makes sense. I can totally relate to this. I'm seeing some heads nodding. So I think it's resonating with folks. Yes. So to that end, when we think about this, we are naturally, I guess, if you will, susceptible. As I said before, we are naturally empathic. And that means that there are all those feels that are often close to the surface. But also, many of us get into the work that we do because we either have experienced or have been helped by someone doing the work that we're currently doing. And so it is recognizing that we've all had our experiences. Some of us would define that as trauma, some of us would not. But that we understand that we're coming into this work again with this open heart, which also does make us a little bit susceptible to things like compassion fatigue and burnout. We're going to ask you a little bit to maybe confront some of those beliefs that you may have created in being of service to other people. Some of you have been doing this for a long time. Some of you may be newer in the field, but this, and you've created maybe a mindset or some scripts or some stories. So there might be times in this morning that we're going to challenge you to really think about where those ideas and those scripts came from, and are they serving you? Or are they contributing to making you maybe more vulnerable to compassion fatigue, burnout, vicarious trauma? And Sonia put in is the type of burnout, the consequences, the effect, the physical, emotional, mental, and the key is to teach us how to prevent. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Sonia. So we talk about, and I've said almost all of these, I think, we sort of talk about them sometimes in the same sentence, in the same breath, similar concepts, but just a tiny bit different. So getting us all sort of in a foundation, or grounding us in just an understanding about some of these common terms that we throw around. So burnout. So burnout is defined as a physical or emotional exhaustion, especially as a result of long-term stress. So that's the definition of it. What does it feel like in your body? What maybe, and please feel free, these could be rhetorical questions, but would love to have, again, either off mute or in the chat. What does physical or emotional exhaustion feel like in your body? What might it look like, either for you or for colleagues? What might be some of the things you tell yourself to maybe convince yourself that you are not in a burnout phase? So I see constantly feeling tired. Yes. Yes. Going to bed tired, waking up tired. Yeah. Moving through mud, brain, and body. TJ, I so totally get that. Like you're slodging through mud up to your knees. No new ideas. Yeah. Creativity. Your brain is so shut down. You're in that. I mean, for those of you that know the hand model, you're in that stress part of your brain. Lack of patience. Absolutely. Brain fog. That you get incapacitated and then you get further frustrated. So you're exacerbating that burnout. You're rolling your eyes at anything that comes to you at work. Oh my goodness. I don't know if it's Rachel or Rochelle. Rochelle, I have no idea what you mean by that. I really don't. Loss of appetite. Yes, Sergio. Absolutely. Absolutely. So next, compassion fatigue. Thank you all for contributing. Yes, Jeremiah, it's just a phase. I'll get over it, right? I'll get over it. I can power through. Okay. Um, so compassion fatigue, a state of tension and preoccupation with individual or cumulative trauma of clients. Okay. A state of tension and preoccupation. What does that look like or feel like? This one's a little harder than thinking about burnout. A state of tension and preoccupation, irritability. Yeah, Alicia. Easily angered. Feel like you have a short temper. What might it look like to other people? What comments might you hear? Both helpful and maybe not so helpful. Yeah, less patient, forgetting things. Absolutely. Numb, avoidant, dismissive, unfriendly. Oh, TJ, she's just being manipulative. You seem tired. Yeah, yeah. You're off. Yes, Sergio. Realizing there will probably not be enough funding to actually do what is needed to help someone. Oh, Jill. Yeah. Andrea's like, yeah, yes, definitely. So when you think about that slide about it's because of our passion, our empathy, it's because of how good we are that at our jobs, the passion that we bring, that we're bringing from our heart, that makes it so impactful, so sometimes very rewarding, but also hard on us. And you think about this state of tension with I'm here to serve other people. And when compassion fatigue, you have crossed over the line from here to serve other people to being irritable, to unfriendly, avoidant, dismissive, less patient, forgetful, easily angered. And then think about what happens in the stories that you're telling yourself when your actions don't match your values, when your actions are not matching your heart. And then what happens to your self talk? What happens to your self compassion when you see this shift or these two things being at odds between this is who I am and why I do the work that I do, and this is how my actions are reflecting my biology. Behavior always matches biology. Think about all those beautiful things that we've learned from Dr. Bruce Perry, from Dr. Jill Stam, from all of the people that we've brought in this work that we do, how often we talk about the importance of community, how often we talk about self-care, how often we talk about the regulate, relate, and then restore. And we know all these things in our brain, and yet all these things are happening in our body, and it creates this dissonance that can send us farther into that spiral. Yeah, and then it gets more negative. You get angrier, you get more short-tempered, you get more dismissive when you're piling on that added stress. And then vicarious trauma. Vicarious trauma is a transformation in trauma workers that results from empathetic engagement with clients and their reports of traumatic experience. We take in that trauma. We sometimes hold that trauma, and we lose the balance between being able to be empathic and practice empathy and having it internalized, if you will, coming into our cells and our body and creating that extra weight. Okay. Which then impacts what we do, how we think, how we feel. The good news is, and we don't have it on the slide today, but the good news is as we begin to talk about compassion resilience, there is also something called vicarious resilience as well. And when you experience the resilience in your clients in this same way, this transformational opportunity, when you witness somebody coming out of their experiences of trauma, the effects of trauma, and making small but significant steps forward, allowing that vicarious resilience in, rather than telling yourself that you need to do one more thing for that client or for that coworker or for that family member that you're trying to help. Reminding yourself to sit back and allow that transformation of vicarious resilience to also get into your cells and into your body. Yes, there we go. Thank you, Angie. I was just going to ask if there were any questions before we launch a poll. But if you do have questions, please feel free. We'll give you a few moments to answer the poll. And then any questions in the chat or comments.
And you should be able to pick more than one. Should be able to. But this is really just to, honestly, to help us see that we are not alone in this, right? Just give it just a few more seconds. We have a couple more people to respond. Then I'll share the results, Sandy.
Okay.
See?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the thing I love is 0 people put never experienced either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's not anybody in the room today of, I don't know how many participants. 28 participants in the room today, and 0 of us have never experienced burnout or compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I can tell you that I have experienced both. Right? We can't vote. But there's a reason why
Yeah.
this is the topic that Sandy and I picked for the mental health and well-being community of practice. Okay. All right, the next is a video. And this video is from, later on, when we do our breakouts and we look at tools, we're going to look at a compassion resilience toolkit that has been created, and do an activity from there. This video clip is from a training that what is the name of the health organization? They're out of Wisconsin. It starts with a B.
It's Rogers Behavioral
Oh,
Health.
Rogers Behavioral Health. Yeah. That they did for our actual trauma sensitive school symposium in 2023. So she is going to talk about compassion fatigue's path, how compassion fatigue actually happens. And she did such a great job that I was like, yeah, instead of trying to explain it myself, we will just listen to her. So I'm going to turn off my video and mic for bandwidth. My son is at home on online school. So if you all wouldn't mind turning off your videos as well, that way, hopefully we can stream it without issues.
ourselves in this state of being burnt out. What we know for sure is it doesn't happen in a silo, and it doesn't happen overnight. And so we leaned into the work of Dr. Eric Gentry, who is an international stigma researcher. And he said, I want to know how it happens. And he looked into people who serve other people in some capacity. So things like educators, health and human service workers, but even things like construction workers or bartenders and waitresses. And he found these 4 different stages. The first stage is our zealot stage. This is basically his cycle of fatigue. How do we end up? And when you think of a stereotypically burnt out person, how do we end up there? And he found these 4 different stages. First is the zealot stage. That's often someone who's new to their role, started a new initiative, taken on a new project, and they're like, I'm going to change the world. Everything's going to be awesome, and I'm going to fix it all because I am committed, I am available, I am ready to problem solve and take on all the stuff. And that can feel really great. And oftentimes it's really great for a system, right? Because you got someone you can depend on. And yet, if we lean into that too much, all of a sudden we've got 96 things on our to-do list, and we don't have room or space for creative problem solving or learning new things. And that ability to be present that we talked about in those compassionate action steps gets smaller and smaller because we're just going through the things on our to-do list. From the zealot stage, then we might move into irritability. And that's where those rose-colored glasses come off a little bit, right? All of a sudden we realize I'm not changing the world overnight. Things aren't as cool as I thought they would be. Maybe my coworkers aren't as fun as I thought they would be. And the system I work in is really complex. And those complexities start to fatigue us. The reality is that it's not what we thought it would be. We start to see diminished creativity, sadness, feeling a little bit like hopeless, like this just isn't what I hoped it could be. And if we stay in this cycle of fatigue, we can go one step further into the withdrawal phase. And that's where our body makes a decision. When we're continually faced with these complexities and are continually met with the challenges of our systems, continually exposed to the trauma that our students bring into our classroom, continually exposed to the societal things that can drive different forces within our world, it's safer for us to pull out, to withdraw a little bit, right? So all of a sudden, we're not showing up 100%. Maybe we're showing up 40, 50, 60%, because that's all we have left to give. And when we're operating in that space, and we're talking about building a compassionate culture, you could imagine how hard it is to find it within you to want to contribute to that compassionate culture, or to even see that other people might need your support, or to recognize within yourself that you need support. And then from there, that's where we see that zombie stage. That's where all of those blinders go up. You are a one-track train in a one-lane road where you feel like you have to do everything all at once because no one else can. And if you don't do it right now, the whole world is going to end. This immense sense of importance, and yet this really immense sense of persecution, that if I am the only person that can do this thing, and if I don't do it, man, we're going to crash and burn. We forget that we've got probably a whole system of support around us if we've talked to each other. And we forget that there's other people who we can lean on for support. And when we continually go through this cycle over and over again, we're stuck between 2 things here. Do I continue to go through this cycle, or can I remove myself entirely? Can I get back to that position of empathy, strength, and hope? The rest of the toolkit is built around developing strategies to get us out of this cycle of empathy, out of this cycle of fatigue. How do we remove ourselves entirely so that we can get ourselves to that position of empathy, strength, and hope? Ourselves in
when I first saw her training, I was like, oh, maybe I'm experiencing a little bit more compassion fatigue than I thought of, just because when I think of compassion fatigue and burnout, I think of the end stage, right? Not that whole continuum stage that it happens in. I kind of liked the whole zealot piece. I was like, oh yeah, where we feel like we can just, like, we're all just excited, and what does that look like and how it can turn into. So are there any thoughts from the video that was just shared of the kind of continuum, right? Like that path and how that actually happens?
And especially related to, we did the poll and then the video. So we answered to Angie's point that, we feel compassion fatigue, we feel burnout. But maybe did you recognize either which cat you were or where you were on that cycle? And I will say that on the website, and Angie's going to share links later about with the compassion resilience toolkit. There's a dog cycle too. So if you're more of a dog person, not a cat person, you can see the dog cycle as well.
Ooh, Tatiana, when you forget that you have a support system that can step in, it can breed resentment that you're alone. Mm-hmm.
And that isolation piece is so critical.
Mm.
Because we often tell ourselves we're the help givers, so we shouldn't need help, or it's going to push someone else over the edge if we ask for help. And for those of you that are familiar with Brené Brown and all the things she talks about with vulnerability and how shame thrives in the darkness. But also, if you're familiar with the US Surgeon General's report on loneliness and isolation, the impact on our physical and mental health of isolation, or I should say physical health, the impact on our physical health of isolation and lack of connection is the equivalent of smoking 14 cigarettes a day. A day.
Phew. I like this, Jeremiah. Also, the lack of empathy sometimes results with us having a lack of control. Yeah, if we don't feel like we are making a difference, it's hard to feel empowered. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So before we go into really just kind of giving you a little bit, showing you more of the toolkit and then going into our breakouts, I wanted to go through some of the signs, right, of compassion fatigue, right? What does this feel like in our body? What does this look like? We talked about it a little bit before, but it can also help us just identify like, oh, I never thought that this was actually, a part of it, right? When we talk about having a window of tolerance, we all have that space, we all have that capacity to be able to just handle life, to be able to handle the things that we are experienced, to be able to handle, all of our to-dos, all of that pieces. All of our windows of tolerance are completely and totally different, right? That is an individual capacity that we have. And we know that when we are outside of our window of tolerance, when we're outside of our capacity to hold, we are going to experience different things. And everyone will, of course, look different because it'll be depend on the way that your personal human system just responds and reacts to those pieces. And when we think of preventing compassion fatigue, when we think of preventing burnout, when we think of preventing the impacts of vicarious trauma, what that really is, what is my capacity to hold? What does it look like when I'm over capacity, right? And if we're over capacity for too long, that's when we experience the effects of the effects. So what can that look like in your system? Hypervigilance, suspicion about people's motives and behaviors, right? Like, are they really legit or are they this, right? Is it just manipulation? Are they just using it, right? We are putting our own concerns and honestly worry, hypervigilance and anxiety on that. Difficulty sleeping, nightmare, intrusive images, intrusive thoughts, right? Anxiety, numbness, inability to experience pleasure, what that looks like. Excessive caregiving on and off the job. It should be like no caregiving to self, right? When we talk about the caregiving is we are excessively caregiving to others, not only on our job, but off. Cynicism, feelings of shame about no longer, being compassionate, right? And being optimistic, reactivation of our own issues. So what does that look like? You know, having thoughts, having flashbacks, all of those pieces. Anger and irritability, often due to fatigue. Again, for me personally, right, my interactions with my kids really are about one of the only ways that I can gauge how I'm feeling, because I dissociate so heavily from my body that a lot of my body symptoms don't come, but my reactions between me and my kids, and where that irritability, and easy to anger piece, is usually like, oh, sorry, kiddo, like I'm overwhelmed, I need to do something. Yeah, give me a minute, let me take some space, I'll come back in. My relationship with others is always my kind of, when I can see when I'm off. Reduced tolerance for what are perceived as others' petty problems, right? This is like, when we have a lot going on, and somebody's complaining about something like, I'm not sure which calendar app I should use. And you're like, really? Like, that's what you're worried about, right? We have less tolerance for what we think would be something that should not be an issue. Depression, exhaustion, increased self-criticism. We talked about this earlier, right? What does that self-talk look like? Feeling estranged from others, that isolation, those pieces, right? These are all ways that we can kind of identify, like, ooh, am I out? What does that look like? Challenges to how we make sense of this world. Shatters ability to believe the world is a safe, just, controllable, and meaningful place. I laugh at controllable because is anything actually really controllable? Carrying the burden of the terrible knowledge about the underbelly of life. It's really hard seeing in the jobs that we do, in the work that we are in, the things that we hear about, right? My husband will always be like, Angela, that's not even possible. I'm like, but we really don't know. Everything can be possible, because when we've seen and we've experienced and we've heard the worst, right? It's really like it's hard, and that's heavy to kind of hold on to. And you realize that the things that you thought could never be possible, somebody has experienced, right? And that has a lot of weight to it, right? There's a lot of weight to it, and forces examination of our own life priorities, right? Like, what does that look like? Are there any other, I'd say, symptoms, right, that that wasn't up here, or ways that you experience it that you wouldn't mind sharing for others to maybe identify when they're in those spaces? One of the relatively new ones for me is I get flush. It had not happened. That's something that is just in the last couple years, when I am overwhelmed and I have overtaxed and I have done what my husband says is too much. You didn't see my air quotes, my hands didn't show up in there. Too much. That my face will get red. It looks like I have a sunburn. Yeah. Yeah, Tatiana, when my happy or proud moments are subtly interrupted with feelings of sadness for those who don't get the same experiences. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. What contributes to vicarious trauma? So what are some of the things that, and we know that having vicarious trauma, it contributes to compassion fatigue and burnout, right? Like, when we are holding this stuff for others, just kind of recognizing what could that be that we are holding for others. bearing witness to trauma, powerlessness of the patient, parallels caregivers' powerlessness if they feel they need to fix it, right? If we have someone that has experienced something similar to what we have experienced, we feel that need. Childhood experience of parentification, which creates unrealistic expectations for us, right? Believing that self-care is less important than the care that we provide others. And then kind of recognition that trauma is linked to the larger social political power imbalances, which are really not easily remedied. And then things that contribute to burnout, right? Our working conditions, what does that look like? Talking about these things that contribute so that when we go into our breakouts and when we go into this next tool and pieces, we can kind of think in that larger, broader context. Like, it's not all on you. It's part of what gets us into compassion fatigue and burnout, right? Is that we feel like it's all on us. It's not all on you. What are some of the other contributing factors around us, right? And what are ways that we can address the compassion fatigue, burnout, vicarious trauma? Really is looking at reducing that stress, right? And kind of transforming that despair that might come. And we do this kind of like the ABCs. I like acronyms, they're easy. Awareness, balance, connection. Right? There's awareness of our own needs, our limits, our emotions, what we actually have, our strengths, all of those pieces. And then the pieces that we're missing, right? Some of our weaknesses. How do we create a balance there? What does that balance look like? It looks different for everything. I can tell that my husband's balance in his life is way different than my balance, right? Because we just have different capacities in different areas. And so, he may have a higher ability to do this here, and having that balance about, and then connection, not only to ourselves, but to others. And really being able to kind of put in strategies, which we'll talk about next, in place to help us create this balance, right? And to create these connections. Are there any questions on what we've talked about so far, on compassion fatigue, on burnout, on the impacts of vicarious trauma, and kind of the signs and symptoms? If you are typing, just continue to type. One of us is always here in chat. I will move us along so we have plenty of time for breakouts, and I want to make sure that,
before we move on, one of the things that just hit me, the awareness of your own needs, limits, emotions, and resources, to Jill's comments earlier about recognizing there probably isn't enough resources and funding to help people. It's where do we put that when we realize somebody needs help? I am aware that that is beyond either my scope or what I have capacity. And how do you find that balance within that tension of where do I let go? Where do I pass off? How do we make sure that we keep ourselves healthy at the same time that we recognize that there aren't enough resources to be able to help the people that we're working with? I don't have an answer. I'm just throwing that out there because it hit me with the resources piece.
Mm-hmm. Is this where you take over?
Yep. Needed a quick sip of coffee first. Okay. So looking at and kind of diving into the what can help piece of it. So what is compassion resilience? And this piece, I look at this and I read this big long definition, and I know we have a lot of our certified ACE trainers in the room. But I always think of this concept of window of tolerance. And so compassion resilience are the things that you do to help create a larger window of tolerance. It's the awareness that you can practice to recognize when your window of tolerance is shrinking and really practice those good self-regulation skills. So self-regulation is really that recognizing the signs and symptoms of stress, recognizing what stresses you out and how you can create the things in your life, whether it's individual self-care, whether it's community care, whether it's how do you create space in your work environment or home environment. There's a lot of different things that you can do, but how this window of tolerance, which is that space where we are relatively regulated, where we are safe enough, where we can take in stress, or when stress happens, it doesn't overflow our cup. So compassion resilience is maintaining this well-being at the same time that you're supporting others. Again, coworkers, as well as those that you serve, as well as family members, extended family members, community members, and maintaining that hope. There were a couple of comments, and one of the things on the list that Angie mentioned was not being able to feel happiness. So hope in the face of adversity while you're taking steps to prevent or even to heal from compassion fatigue and create that healing. So the website, it's end stigma, eliminate stigma.org. And Angie's going to throw some links in the chat. And it's this organization, Hannah belongs to it. It's an organization to end stigma together. So there's multiple organizations and folks involved. And this is the page for the Compassion Resilience Toolkit. And from the time that Hannah was part of our, pretty sure it was the Trauma Sensitive School Symposium. I know we talked about this and I still can't remember which one she came to, but I have, this is such an amazing resource. There's a ton of resources on here. There are different toolkits for human services, parents and caregivers, and schools. And so very detailed, just again, and it's not just for frontline workers. It's not just for people doing direct service or direct care. There are also pieces in each of the toolkits for leadership and administration, and how do you create a compassionate work environment that supports compassion resilience. So I honestly can't say enough about how amazing all of the resources on this site are. For those of you that do trainings or do professional development, we're going to do one of the activities in, I believe it's in the schools toolkit. And so you'll get a chance to see that. But again, just very easy to do. All of the instructions, everything is there for you to be able to bring it into your trainings as activities in your training, to bring it into your staff meetings, professional development that you do with staff. The parent toolkit, if you're working with parents or caregivers, being able to bring some of those activities in, or some of those, there's a lot of reflection resources as well. So just, yeah, just a lot there. So there is, I think this is Hannah, the next one is Hannah's kind of overview.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll let the expert tell you about the toolkit, and then we'll take a break.
Yep, and then we'll take a break after that. Yeah, the exercise that we will be doing is actually in all of the it's in all of the toolkits. I really love each of the toolkits because they kind of break it out into like the strategies and tools. You have like your mental, your physical strategies, your mind strategies. So it's really, really great. But one of the tools that we will be doing is boundary setting, which is kind of like our first step, right? We need to have those boundaries first before we can move forward into those pieces. So the video is, Hannah, it's a clip from their longer kind of advertising, it's not marketing video, I guess, for lack of kind of a better term. I put that link to the full YouTube in chat, but I just wanted to, we took just a small clip out of it, so she can go into a little bit more of some of the pieces that you get from the toolkits themselves. Okay, here we go.
Toolkits are designed to engage employees in learnings, conversations, and activities about building compassion resilience within their workplace culture. Simply stated, compassion resilience is the ability to return to a position of empathy, strength, and hope despite the challenges the world offers. In order to do this, an individual needs a compassionate, equitable, and trauma-informed workplace and team surrounding them. The toolkits lay out a series of concepts that build upon each other, like scaffolding to support the overall goal of a compassionate culture for employees and those we serve. Each section of the toolkit takes one or two concepts and offers a background document for individual learning, activities to engage participants in conversations to make the concepts relevant for their context, visuals to anchor learning and inspire ongoing conversation and common language across the organization, and what we call a circle agenda to guide facilitators if small group meetings are the chosen implementation approach.
Okay, like I said, just a real quick overview of some of the components that are in the tool, in each one of the toolkits. So we will do breakouts and we will do the tools after we come back from break. Believe it or not, Sandy and I are actually on time, which so very rarely happens on our agenda. I'm not sure we know what to do with it. Gives you all an extra 3 minutes. But we will all take a break for 8 minutes, come back at 11:05, and we will get started with the second half.
Welcome back, everyone. If you can just put a emoji or thumbs up or in the chat. Angie did put the activity that we're going to do, this compassionate boundary setting activity, the documents in the chat. Thank you all. Thank you, Rochelle. That's great. That's exactly how I feel today. I woke up yesterday and kept forgetting it was Monday. And so now I'm like, is it Friday yet? I just don't even know what day it is. So you can download that and follow along if you'd like, or just listen into the instructions for the breakout and enjoy and interact. So we'll have breakout rooms of just 3 people. So you have plenty of time to connect and chat. When you get into your breakout room, if you all could take about 30 seconds to identify or volunteer someone to be your timekeeper. And then a separate person to be the moderator. And the timekeeper is pretty self-explanatory, but we'll give you reminders in your breakout room as we get close to the 15 minutes. But for the moderator is just to try to ensure some equitable participation and create space for those who want to verbally engage that, might need a little extra time to think through, and a little extra space to share. So those two things, timekeeper and moderator, once you get in. And so we're going to start out with the beginning of this toolkit beginning of this activity in the toolkit, and have you start thinking about, what does a compassionate work environment look like, feel like? I always think of all the sentences: look, feel, touch, taste, hear. Okay. So what does experiencing a compassionate work environment look like? Okay. It's a place where you can be your best self in the course of your job. It does not mean everything's perfect 100% of the time. So we want to be realistic in our expectations. But how can you be your best, bring your full self the majority of the time? Okay. So thinking about that, and specifically in your breakout session, and you can share that once you get in and kind of get all settled, but we want you to focus on, what are the behaviors that lead to that environment? Okay, what are the behaviors that lead to that environment? So what would demonstrate, what does it look like on the outside to be promoting a compassionate work environment? Okay, and don't forget, always remember the two lenses, because often when I work with folks that are caregivers, in whatever capacity you're a caregiver, your often first focus is, what does this look like for the client, or for the end user, or for the people we're serving? But think about it. We want you to squarely focus on, what does it look like for you first? And then if you have time in your breakout, then talk about what that looks like for the client, or for the end user, or for the people that you're serving. Okay. Everybody, that makes sense? Any questions before Angie opens breakout rooms? All right, I think we're ready, Ange.
And we will go for about 16 minutes till 11:25.
All right, I think we got a few more 5 seconds. The breakout rooms will kick everyone out.
It's the first I've seen this image. That is the cutest. Oh my gosh.
Way too loud.
I know, isn't he so cute?
Gosh. Oh, I love it.
Welcome back, everyone. In the interest of time, I would love, Angie and I were talking about, like, what we want to hear from you. And if you could share in the chat, what behaviors came up? What behaviors create a compassionate environment? So what were some of those behaviors that you all talked about or identified? And if any of our groups talk specifically about leadership behaviors as well, would love to hear about that too. Yeah. So what behaviors did you identify that create compassionate environment? Yeah. One-on-one check-ins with your supervisor, being helpful. And Rochelle, a little bit more. What does being helpful look like? Collaboration, micro and macro level collaboration. Nice, Lily. Honoring who we are as people, sharing in an honest and vulnerable way. That's great, Sergio. Encouraging and honoring diversity, being honest, Leaders modeling listening in a judgment-free way. Thank you, Amy. Leaders that give grace. Absolutely, Andrea. Treat our staff the way we want to treat our clients, model with each other what we want to see. A company culture that prioritizes hiring diverse workplace and celebrates unique identities. Understanding humans can be shown at no cost to the corporation. Treating staff the way you expect them to treat clients, patients, participants. If you provide them grace, you need to provide the staff the same. Absolutely. Authentically appreciating and respecting each other's contributions. Everybody wants to be, to have a pat on the back. We all need that. Adults need it just as much as kids do, that affirmation. Not the mindset that's not part of my job. Thank you, Rochelle. Being helpful, that we don't have the mindset, it's not part of my job, just getting the job done together. Being able to admit we don't have the capacity and letting that be okay. Wow, TJ, that's amazing. Honesty you can count on. Company-wide priority to acknowledge each other's contributions from top down and across with coworkers. Leaders who follow through on their commitments, modeling the ideal and proactively protects the time of staff to take care of themselves. That is huge. Rather than you need to go out and practice self-care, I am, as the leader, protecting your time to be able to do that. Awesome. Be able to speak freely and not have fallout. Amy, speak your mind. A good leader is someone who steps in because you need the flexibility, even if you are a direct service provider, having grace for others and knowing that you deserve it yourself. Amazing. Those sound like some pretty awesome conversations. So I'm going to hand off to Angie to take us to the next conversation.
I love this. What great conversations you all are having. I will be downloading the chat, and in the follow-up, I will send all of the behaviors and then also the results of our next breakout. So our next breakout is, okay, these are the behaviors that you would like to see, right? When it comes to setting boundaries, that compassionate boundary setting, Sandy and I were talking while you all were in breakouts, that, you know, even for me at 49 years old, that boundary setting, because I never had boundaries growing up, that boundary setting is still a very difficult concept for me. And although I've been working on it for years, right, it still is. So I was talking of how, you know, this weekend I was talking to my husband, and I said, I have been slowly, my intention was to slowly start doing in-person things again. And I said to him, I said, I don't think I went very slow. And he literally looked at me like, really, you just didn't think you did? Like, of course you haven't, right? But to me, it took me a bit to multiple months. It's been months before I recognized, like, ooh, okay. And then he says, okay, well, you worked all weekend because you had so you know that you should be taking time off during the week, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to work on that. So when we're talking about setting the boundaries, we have to identify, this is the ideal. These are the ideal behaviors we want, right? What do we need to say no to in order to support what we want, right? I wanted to start doing in person more, but my boundary, right, of doing it slowly, I need to say no to some of those opportunities and schedule them maybe a little bit further out if I'm really looking at identifying slowly, right? So we've identified the behaviors that we want. What do we need to do to say no? What do we need to say no to in order to support our yeses? And some tips for doing this, right? Know what we want to say yes to in our life, what are our values and priorities, being proactive, having meetings to discuss the boundaries, structure offers safety for both sides, right? Just say it, don't make people guess. Use simple and direct language when we're looking at what are those things that we need to say no to, what are those boundaries we need to create. Reinforce by pointing out the violations or near violations in the moment. Give explanations that are specific, relevant to the other person, and often shared solutions. Back up your boundary with action. If you give in, you invite people to ignore your needs. And even just recognizing, oh, this was a boundary I set for myself. I know I violated it. However, I'm going to reestablish it, right? Remembering your locus of control. Boundaries aren't about perfection. When you must say yes, look for where you have been in control. So as we go into this next breakout, we'll do about 15 minutes again. And what do you need to say no in order to support those behaviors that we identified in the first one? We'll see you all back here about 11:50. All right, welcome back. Everyone has teleported back into the room. And no matter how many times I do our virtual meetings, I'm back from breakout. Sandy's laughing because she knows what song is in my head, which is the Welcome Back Cotter song. And I will age myself, but all the time, and it just plays. Anyway, I can only imagine what the conversations are like. I love when we go to close breakout rooms and everybody waits until the end of them to come back in. That just means that great conversations were happening. So we have been with you now for almost 2 hours. We really appreciate the time that you all have taken out of your day for yourself, to look at how does our work affect us, right? And what are some of the strategies that we could that we can do to take care of ourselves. So with that, and with the conversations y'all would have, I would like to know in the chat, and you do not have to share if you are not comfortable, but I would like you all to write it down on a piece of paper, on your phone, on your computer, somewhere that you will see it. What is one thing that you commit to saying no to in order to achieve those yeses that that we discussed earlier? So what do you commit to say no to moving forward? Please feel free to share it in the chat with others for some extra accountability. Ooh, Melissa, that's a good one. Saying no to overthinking how I presented in meetings. Say no to overcommitment. Linda, I swear I work on that every day. Saying no to overcommitment. Yes, Sandy, I commit to saying no to, quote, just one more thing before I shut down my computer for the day. There's always just one more thing, right?
And usually that one more thing can wait until tomorrow. It doesn't have to be done tonight.
Yeah, and usually my one more thing translates into another one more thing because they were connected to another one more thing because they were connected. Yes. Ooh, yes. No to my imposter syndrome. That's a good one. Ooh, saying no to filling my cup to the limit. Yeah, leaving some space. I started, instead of doing 1 hour meetings, I started instituting 45-minute meetings. Like when I go to schedule them in Zoom, to like not just do the standard 60 minutes that's there, but to actually click into 45 minutes to try and make myself some buffer space. Say no to filling my cup to the limit. No to being caught in the hall on my way out of the school. Please send me an email and we can check in tomorrow. Yes, Lily. Yes. Please send me an email and we can check in tomorrow. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, we will close this out with one of my favorites is remember, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. It is incomplete. You all do amazing work, and the vast majority of us work in systems that are underfunded and understaffed, and we have a lot on our plate. And we are committed to making this world a better place, right? That's why we do what we do. We're not here, as Sandy's tongue-in-cheek joke is, but we're not here making, even hundreds of thousands of dollars, even $100,000, most of us, right? We are here because we would like to leave this place better than we have found it, right? And better that some of us are experiencing it for. And knowing that if your compassion does not include yourself, you will not be able to, right, leave this world a better place. And you're definitely not having a better place in this world for yourself in this. And so super thankful for all of you taking this this time and space. We will be sending a recording of the community of practice, and then also the links and the resources that we have shared, in addition to the de-identified behaviors that were identified for change, and then also what we say no to. If you would like to join us on social media, we are really trying to work hard at adding things to. The thing that gets added to the most is our YouTube channel. But this link to the social media page takes you to all of the different links, whatever suits your fancy there. For our YouTube video, we have a specific Resilient and Empowered Educator series that we post regular videos to, for those educators that are in this space. We also have a trauma-informed trainer the podcast series kind of thing that we will be posting extra videos to. And then And then just our regular channel. And then of course, this is our website if you need anything. Thank you all so very much. I hope you all take some time and space for yourself today, whether that be 5 minutes or 5 hours, whatever it is that your body needs. And we are always here for anything. Thank you.